Hey guys, welcome back to Storytime. We are reading Sink or Swim, and we're starting chapter 10 today. So if you have missed any, make sure you go back and watch those videos that you've missed. They should be on the school website for each week, and then if they're not there, you can always find it by looking me up on YouTube under Mr. Isaiah. You'll see my channel below and should be able to go to any of my videos. Okay? Chapter 10. For the next 6 weeks, we were even busier than we'd been in boot camp, learning everything Lieutenant Commander McDaniel ordered us to learn about protecting cargo ships and sinking submarines. A lot of it was what they'd already drilled us on over and over in boot camp, only now we knew it even better. Seamanship, boat handling, damage control, firefighting, ship-to-ship communications, and a lot of it was figuring out how to spot a U-boat, the reflection of a periscope lens, a swell like the one that came up under Danny and me, a shadow just under the surface of the ocean, and how to tell the difference between a U-boat and something else like a whale or a school of dolphins. The first thing they taught us, though, was why the German submarines were called U-boats. Anybody know? An instructor asked. There were at least 100 of us crammed in a classroom made for maybe 30. A guy who didn't look much older than me raised his hand. I held my breath, wondering if it was going to be like boot camp, where a question wasn't really a question and the instructor would yell at the kid and order him to do push-ups or worse. But the instructor just nodded at him and said, "Yes." "Untersea boat," the guy said. A bunch of guys laughed. "Speak English," somebody shouted. The instructor told everybody to be quiet. "That's right," he said. Untersea boat. It's German, and do you know what it means, son?" The kid looked like he wished he could disappear, but he answered, "Yes, sir, it just means undersea boat." Boot is German for boat. Somebody in the back of the classroom yelled out, "I'd like to take an undersea boot and kick Hitler in the butt with it." And everybody laughed again. Much to the relief of the kid who was translating, the instructor moved on. More classes followed that one. They taught us all about depth charges, which were big metal drums full of explosives that could be set to detonate at different depths, and how to launch them off of our ship with what they called K and Y guns. That taught us how to shoot the rocket bombs with devices called hedgehogs. They taught us about how those depth charges in rocket bombs could also damage our own ship, and how we were supposed to do emergency repair even when it happened. And when it got hit by somebody else's bombs, whether sub or ship or attacking plane, classes were mostly on sweltering Quonset huts, where everybody sweated through their clothes in the Miami heat and stunk up the place. When they lit up cigarettes in there, too, I thought I would pass out. A lot of guys smoked cigarettes or used chewing tobacco or dip. Woody said he'd done it all, growing up in tobacco country, but I never saw him with a cigarette, tin, or pouch, and he actually turned green during an especially smoky class one day and went outside and threw up. I stayed away from all the tobacco because I knew Mama wouldn't want me knew Mama wouldn't ever want me to do any of that stuff. On Sunday, we went out to sea on our first practice run on a patrol craft, which was about 170 feet long and had a crew of 60 men and 5 officers. The PC's job was to escort cargo ships and troop transports and protect them from U-boats. The commanding officer was a lieutenant named Chris Foss, and he introduced us to the ship while we were still tied up to the dock. "Think of it as a sort of mini destroyer," he said. When we all gathered on deck, Woody and I had been assigned to the same ship. And usual, he was standing right next to me like he thought we were under order to literally stick close together. These PCs were designed for one single purpose, and that's anti-submarine warfare. Lieutenant Foss said. He was above us on the bridge. Most of you will be assigned to a PC once you finish your training, so no better time than the present to learn everything there is to know. He tapped the rail. This baby can tail a U-boat at its maximum speed, and it's got the Navy's best sound equipment. A PC is more maneuverable than a sub, and it presents a small target for a sub to evaluate. So there's less chance for a PC catching a torpedo, which should mean a greater chance for a PC catching the sub. Woody elbowed me. Sounds like he's trying to sell us a car, he whispered. A petty officer was standing behind us. He leaned close to the Woody's ear and hissed, I'll be having words with you later, sailor. Now shut it while the captain is talking. I thought Woody was going to faint. I inched away from him, wishing he had been standing next to somebody else. Lieutenant Foss was explaining all about the PCs, 2 diesel engines, how seaworthy it was, and how it was possible to practically spin it on an axis near the mast. He said the ship was designed so that in rough seas it could right itself even if it rolled 110 degrees, which would mean the ship could be almost upside down and still not capsize. That was kind of hard to believe. I'd been on a lot of boats and in some very big waves, but I'd never seen anything like that. Then he stopped for a minute, maybe to let us absorb all of the information he was giving us about the patrol craft, or maybe to change the subject. You will hear people, good Navy people, refer to the patrol craft fleet, and all of you will serve on a PC as the Donald Duck Navy. Small ship, thin hull, limited firepower, but what you will be doing is no joking matter, and how well you are trained to do it is something your instructors are dead serious about. Dead serious because if you don't learn everything about anti-submarine warfare stone cold, eat it, sleep it, breathe it, you and the ships and the people you are sworn to protect will end up at the bottom of the ocean. He paused again while we all looked at one another, wondering what he was going to say next. U-boats are not true submarines, he continued. They are warships that spend most of their time on the surface. Their deck-mounted guns are more powerful than yours will be. They can submerge for limited periods, but they can do a lot while they're there. They can travel anywhere from 60 to 100 miles underwater at a time to attack our ships, evade our pursuit, and escape the bad weather that will neutralize your effectiveness, but not theirs. A U-boat crew can clear its bridge, close hatches, and dive to periscope depth in 30 seconds. Half a minute, and they're ready to fire a 20-foot-long torpedo at you or at one of the ships you are sworn to protect. That means after a U-boat sighting, you have even less time than that to get to general quarters. In order to attack that submarine when you see it submerge, instead of just doing its torpedo, or worse, watching helplessly as it sinks another ship in your convoy. You must be able to scramble to general quarters in 25 seconds. You will begin training to do this. He paused to set his stopwatch. Right now. And at that, a klaxon horn sounded, the call to general quarters. We'd all been assigned a post already. Mine was loading 34-pound shells into the 3-inch 50 caliber gun just below the bridge. Woody's was in the engine room, so we all took off and immediately started running into one another, knocking each other down blocking somebody else's way. Guys were screaming at one another so loud that nobody could hear anything. The officers roared at us and shoved guys this way and that way, but we couldn't seem to get anywhere. And I was only trying to make my way about 10 feet from where I started. Maybe it was because I was so small, but the jostling forced me closer and closer to the edge of the ship until I was clinging to the rail to keep from going over the side. And then, next thing I know, a couple of big guys slammed into me, and I lost my grip, and over I went, 20 feet down and straight into the water. I'm not sure anybody even noticed. No horns sounded, no whistles blew. I knew that much. I found my sailor's cap and stuffed it in my pocket and swam over to the dock. Though it was hard going in my work shirt and dungarees and boots. By the time I hauled myself out of and walked the gangplank back onto the patrol craft, everybody had miraculously found their way to wherever they were supposed to be, except me. My boots made a squishy sound as I navigated over to the deck cannon and the pile of shells I was supposed to help load for us to fire at whatever U-boat might have been on the attack. Lieutenant Foss glared at me from the bridge, as if he thought I'd deliberately jumped in to go swimming. I felt guilty even though I knew it wasn't my fault, but there was no way to explain. 5 minutes, he said, then took 5 minutes. Congratulations, you're all dead. I found out later that Woody didn't do much better down in the engine room, 2 decks below, and as far as you could go on the ship, 12 guys packed in there like sardines at first. Only as soon as Woody got there, the engine room chief ordered 8 of them to turn around and make their way back topside to load depth chargers. He gave Woody some kind of order that Woody couldn't remember when he told me about it, because when the chief said port side, he went starboard instead, hit his head on a pipe, and knocked himself out. The next day was a Sunday, but instead of going to chapel, Woody went off somewhere by himself. He didn't tell me where, but he didn't mind having a few hours to myself. But I didn't mind having a few hours to myself. I went to chapel and prayed for Mama and Danny and everybody else on Oak Rock. The minister had us all pray for our troops and ships fighting the Japanese out in the Pacific. And he had us pray for the poor Soviet people in Leningrad, which was surrounded by Hitler's army and under siege. It was threatening to fall like every other city in the Soviet Union had fallen to the Nazis. And finally, he had us pray for the British tank forces who were battling the German army under Field Marshal Rommel for control of North Africa, and not faring very well. So far, we'd been sending supplies and weapons and food to England and the Soviet Union under President Roosevelt's Lend-Lease Act. But people were still wondering when America and the Allies would be able to launch a counterattack against Germany and Italy, a full-on invasion to take back France and liberate the rest of the European countries that Hitler had steamrolled with his Blitzerrigs. Right now, England was the only holdout besides the Soviet, and it didn't seem like either one of them could hold up for much longer without our help. Meanwhile, the German U-boats kept sinking more and more of our cargo supply ships all along the East Coast and down in the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. I was lying on my bunk that afternoon thinking about all that and missing Mama and Danny and home when Woody came back from wherever he had been. It didn't take long to get it out of him. He rolled up his sleeves and showed me. On his right forearm he'd gotten a tattoo that said starboard, and on his left arm he had one that said port. Should have done this a long time ago, he said, rubbing the bruise on his forehead where he'd run into the pipe. Now that I know which direction is which, I'm ready to go hunt us down some U-boats. And that's the end of chapter 10. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day. Take it easy. Be good, behave, make sure you're helping your parents out around the house. Don't fight with your brothers and sisters. Just be nice and be good. This time is trying for everybody, and we've all got to do our part. Okay? I love you guys so much. Make sure that you subscribe and click the bell for notifications so you don't miss a thing. And say, hey, what's up in the comments. I love hearing from you guys. All right? Take it easy. Bye-bye.